You truly are what the world has been waiting for. And to You truly are what the world has been waiting for because your love continues to shine a light on the ways that the ego may try to trick you and stick to you. And we are going to continue on our path to spiritual liberation instead. So let's get started.
Welcome to the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, a place for the strong, sensitive, spiritual seeker to recognize the perfection of your human journey as a pathway to remembering your worlds through proven and grounded frameworks that support you to live in the wholeness you already are. For over the past 2 decades, I have supported people from all around the world, as well as Fortune 500 companies, to dissolve the divisions within them and live with greater empowerment and love. This podcast is an exploration of the paradoxes that befuddle us as we live our lives being both human and divine. Together, you and I, along with other experts, will navigate integrating psychology and spirituality, the divine feminine and the divine masculine, the darkness and the light, to create greater sacred union from within. I believe through your remembering that you are innately divine, that you will allow yourself to more openly shine. So let's get to it because your unique light is needed more than ever.
Welcome back to I'm Perfectly Divine podcast. We've been on this series of talking about how the spiritual path is a way forward to greater liberation, internally and externally. And so I want to go over the past couple episodes because I think they're important. They tie in. They're not necessary for you to listen to. Of course, I would love you to, but let me just briefly go over and then you can decide, if you haven't listened, why you might want to. First, we did part 1, episode 334, and really discussing why being spiritual does not remove us from what is happening in the world. And for me personally, I go into why I believe I can no longer utilize my spirituality as a way to stay comfortable, even though I so desire peace and love to protect peace, that it's not worth it if I'm not doing that within the world and for one another. And so I brought that forward along with how history shows us what happens when good people don't wake up in time. And there is this historical precedence for us to look at with that. Part 2, I go into a little bit deeper about something that has been happening for longer than our current political situation, where we look at how spiritual traditions, especially Christianity, what I was raised in and still practice, but a version that is different perhaps from traditional Christianity, how it was shaped by people in power, men in power, and who then use those teachings to serve their agenda to control. And then really discussing how control is still used to make people afraid of the suppressed gospels, sidelining Mary Magdalene, and really creating a resurrection that was different from what was taught in the way, those who practiced the way, which was a living inner transformational experience, to this future promise. And to me, what that speaks to is how it conveniently asks people to accept injustice in this lifetime in exchange for reward later, like you'll be better for it later, which isn't right and isn't what I believe what Jesus or Mary Magdalene intended. And so this really points to how those who win control the narrative. It's happening again, and we want to be aware of how this happened 2,000 years ago and continues to happen in our history, because this is how history repeats itself, and this is where we can step in and recognize what's going on to do things differently, to have a different outcome. In order for us to do that, I believe it's also important for us to talk about today's topic, which may be actually the most difficult piece to all of this, because what we've been covering before, I'm talking about others, the Roman Empire or men in power or corrupt politicians. And while all of that is true, and we've got to name it and we want to see it, it also speaks to what we need to name and speak to within inside of us and look at ourselves honestly. And so what I have found is that the ego's last trick, and maybe one of the most stickiest ways the ego can get to us, is convincing us, you and me, the good people, that we are the exception. It's so easy to say to ourselves that, my side is the right side. My spiritual path has made me more evolved, and I know better compared to those who haven't done the work. That we are the ones who see clearly, right? And here's that subtle danger in, even when we say, those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, because the ego can take that to mean we are somehow superior or more advanced. And that is not what this is about. The thing about living the way of love is that you are even more aware, to me, in my opinion, how quote unquote unadvanced you are. That's how I feel. I mean, I can only speak for myself, but to me, having eyes to see is not elitist. It is knowing how often my ego tries to get in the way in how I see things and blind me to seeing things the way that I'm used to seeing things. How I'm used to seeing things. And the ego loves that because that equates to comfort and safety. Or hearing only what I want to hear, because it's easier to disregard, call it fraudulent, false, etc., rather than actually look at what others are speaking. And then, of course, to do the work to make sure what is being spoken is and coming through is truth, to be able to look at different sources for that. So to me, it's not advancement when we say we have eyes to see and ears to hear. It's a sense of compassion for myself and others towards how easy it is for the ego to freaking snag us once again and blind and block our ears, block our hearing, make us deaf to what's really going on. And for those with eyes to see and ears to hear, it's not an advancement, but a willingness to see and hear our egos in action over and over again, because we are that aware of how persistent the ego is, and we don't shame ourselves for it. We just have understanding around it, that that's part of why we are here, to experience that so that we can get clear about our truth, because that's how we embody it. And that's why there's no shame in it. And when you embody it, you create a sense of knowingness within you that gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And that's the beauty. Recently, I was at church, and the minister announced that we would be singing the prayer of St. Francis Assisi. And I literally turned to my husband and I'm like, oh boy, because I knew the tears were going to start flooding, and they certainly did. And this prayer speaks to me about what it means to be able to recognize our ego and have compassion. This prayer has been with me a long time, exactly because it is an awakening to choose love over the ego. And for me, that has not always been easy. And if you feel the same way, I want to assure you, it certainly does not make us less than. So there was a period in my life where, upon honest reflection, I was far more focused I'm looking to be understood rather than understanding others. And maybe you have felt that way too, because it's a human thing. And it's not because we are bad. It's likely because things happen to you where you didn't feel understood, and it happened over and over and again. And so, of course, you seek understanding. But the key that we're finding is to find that understanding of ourselves within, not outside of ourselves. And this shift that has happened in my life happened through going through the heroine's journey. And it feels like nothing short of a miracle, because I believe the heroine's journey is a miracle. And it's guiding us to continue to sift through the ego's lies. So today, the prayer of St. Francis is a daily practice or a daily reminder of how I want to live. And I am constantly, can't underline that one enough, constantly challenged by that. Not in big ways. I know my heart. I know I'm not being malicious, but in the smaller, quieter ways, the ways for me, how it comes forward for me is where I prioritize my own comfort. The ways I unconsciously want things to go my way and tell myself that it's fair and trying to make things go my way. And these are the places the ego works most invisibly. You know, it's not through these like grand acts of selfishness, but it's the thousand small choices we have every day that are guiding us to what it means to show up in greater love. And can I take off my blinders to see how I'm participating in that? I do this not because I believe I'm flawed. I simply believe each of our hearts are like these diamonds that desire to shine forward so purely and expansively and without distortion. It's like built in us. And there's this driving force within each of us that desires to experience this more and more deeply so that we can embody this love that is always available to us, that's always been available to us. And so, what I keep coming back to is to let go of what my ego considers, quote unquote, winning, so that we have the energy and the focus and determination to show up for what really matters. And as I continue that practice, what truly matters to me right now, and what I believe is one of the most important things we can reckon with, is that it is not neutral to continue to sideline Mary Magdalene from Christianity. And the thing is that I know there are genuinely good people, people with real, sincere faith and relationships with God or the divine, who either can't look at the Gospel of Mary because they're afraid, because they've been taught to be afraid, or who have looked and still haven't come forward because they're afraid to rock the boat. And let me share that I understand both. Like, I've been in both categories and still am in ways. But here is how the ego hooks onto this. When we are so attached that we are good and spiritual, that we are good and Christian, that we are good and Jewish, Muslim, whatever it is, that means that we are to stay good. We better not rock the boat. We better not upset the community we love. And we can convince ourselves that staying quiet is the neutral choice when our heart knows better, when our heart feels differently. And staying quiet isn't neutral. It's not. just as I learned that calling myself spiritual while avoiding politics wasn't neutral, it was complicity. And the same is true here. Not honoring Mary Magdalene isn't a middle ground. It's like just by staying neutral about her, that's not a middle ground. It's a continuation of the very erasure that we talked about in our last episode. And when we sideline her, we sideline all women. We silently reinforce the message that it's acceptable to diminish the wisdom women bring to spirituality and the world. We continue to silently diminish the unique expression of love of the divine feminine and how she balances us out. She brings us balance, especially in a world that has been so built on winning, powering over, conquering, and helping us to remember who we truly are, guiding us on the ways that we can sift through the ego layers and distill our hearts in truth and greater love. And what I know in my heart is that this imbalance isn't just a theological question, but yet it's so important for those who say that they want to be an embodiment of love to recognize. Because while this is showing up in Christianity and other religions, it's also showing up in our individual psyches, in our relationships, and in a world that continues to run on power over dynamics as well as control and greed. We don't have the balance of the feminine. And again, this isn't about raising the feminine up and saying, you know, it's all about her. We just need to balance each other out. And we must be as honest about this as we would be about how we talk about business leaders who consider themselves good, right? I mean, they've got the money, they generously give to charity, and yet at the same time, are they enforcing policies within their company, within their organization that erodes their employees who make them the money that they have, and it erodes their financial, physical, or mental well-being? And yet they just couch it as, well, that's just doing business. If we're willing to call that out on another, we want to be willing to call this out within ourselves. Because the thing that is so important about how the ego sticks to us about being good is that the ego doesn't need us to be malicious. The ego just needs us to prioritize our own comfort, our own identity, our need to be seen as one of the good ones, over the truth that is sitting right in front of us. And here's the thing, most people do not want to wake up and cause harm to anyone, right? That's not anyone's notion of how they want to live their life. And that is exactly what makes it so easy to miss within ourselves. Because it's not intentional. And this is what makes the spiritual path so challenging. Because the ego will even hijack spirituality itself, the love of the divine or God or Jesus itself. And it will turn I'm spiritual, I'm Christian, I'm love into just another label to feel superior about. And that happens when we consider ourselves, I'm more awake. I can see what they can't. And suddenly we've done the same very thing that we were criticizing. We used a belief to create separation rather than to see one another, rather than to have connection. And the work is catching that as much as we can with love and compassion for ourselves. So the thing is, whether someone calls themselves a Christian, a Democrat, a Republican, a Muslim, a Jew, when our ego becomes overly attached to that label, it stops being about the values we genuinely believe in. And it starts being about an identity that we feel we need to protect. And the ego uses that label to whisper to us, I'm the right one. I'm the good one. I'm better than those who believe different than me. And you can just feel the separation in that. And the moment that happens, we stop seeing people and we start seeing opponents. We stop seeking truth and we start defending a team. And that's not faith, and it's not even politics. That is the ego doing exactly what the ego does. It's using any available vehicle to keep us feeling separate, superior, safe. So I don't want to leave us here, because what are we supposed to do with this? Well, here's the thing. If you consider yourself spiritual, you are the ones we've been waiting for to usher in change. Not because you have all the answers, not because you're superior, not because your path is the right one. It's simply because you have been practicing doing the work to see past your ego's defenses imperfectly, bit by bit, learning not to identify yourself with the things outside of you so that you are not attached to defending the things outside of you. And that is exactly the kind of seeing clearly that this moment in history requires from us. So again, I used to say I'm spiritual and not political, but being spiritual sets you up to be someone who has the practice to see clearly without political affiliation, without believing one side has it all right, without being so identified with something outside of yourself that you must defend it in order to feel good about who you are. And here's what is so important, because I know this stops a lot of us in our tracks, and it stopped me. And the thing is that none of us are going to get this right every time. I am not going to get this right every time. You're not going to get this right every time. And yet, still, you and your truth and your voice are needed. And I don't want this to stop you in your tracks like it did for me, because I know for a long time I didn't speak up because I was afraid of getting things wrong, of not having the full picture, of saying something imperfect. But that fear, that need to only show up when we're certain, is itself the ego's trick. And people who love the ego love to hook onto that and point that out about you. But don't let that stop you. Don't let it keep you quiet under the guise of humility. Real humility isn't silence. Real humility is being willing to be wrong and say so. And let me just tell you how unique that is right now in a world that is fed right now on division and, I have the answer and I'm so certain. The most radical thing you can do is admit when you've missed something and move forward with an open heart. Holy crap. Right? And I'm laughing because we know in our hearts it's not that hard, but somehow the world, when it points its fingers, when it's not compassionate, when it thinks that one group knows the way, and they try to diminish and diminish and diminish you, just like they did Mary Magdalene. They think that's the way to keep you quiet. We let them win if we allow that divisiveness to control us. And so every imperfect attempt builds your voice, your courage, your willingness to stay in the conversation that is going to be messy, and it all counts more than you realize. It's all moving us. It's all creating that ripple effect that we are here at this time to create. And it's no coincidence that you're here during this time, during so much upheaval. It's because your heart. So I can say for myself that hiding under I am spiritual is not spiritual, and I'm very clear about that. It's actually very cowardly. And it isn't what the spiritual masters throughout the ages taught me, taught us. What they taught was that when we overcome our fears, we are free. And that is exactly what those in power have always feared the most. And so it's our time now to reclaim that truth. The invitation is not to find the right label to stand behind. It's that we become someone who has done enough inner work that we don't need that label so much. This is our sovereignty. We're not always going to see things the same way, and yet we can still speak our truth with compassion and love as much as possible. So to me, to really walk the way of love is to take responsibility to no longer be complicit. No matter how imperfectly, just being true to what we know in our hearts isn't right. And I will close, as I always do, by reminding you, there is nothing within you to fix, only something to remember. And as you remember, you become someone who can show up and help fix what is broken in the world around you. No one person is broken. Just as you are not broken, no one is broken, but the perceptions that have justified powering over others, those need changing, as they do within ourselves, as they do in the world. And I entrust that work to those who are willing to remember, even when it is the most difficult thing we have ever had to face within ourselves. And that's why I deeply honor you for walking the way of love, however your heart has guided you to do, and the courage and love that it has taken you. And to remember, you and your voice and your love are needed more than ever. So until next time, again, there is nothing to fix. Just remember. I'll see you next week.
I am so honored you have joined me today. If you enjoyed the I'm Perfectly Divine podcast, subscribe so you don't miss any of our power-filled episodes. Also, if you know another who is strong, sensitive, and spiritual and wants to dive deeper into emotions and ancient wisdom so they too can create profound peace and fulfillment from within, please share this podcast. Thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to reconnecting with you soon.